friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and given that today's date is October 19th, I thought it might be fun to do a quick video on tarot decks that might be fun to use this time of year when the veil is rather thin. I'll start out by using, by pointing out some of my most recent acquisitions. I'm not one to jump on a bandwagon and buy a deck just because everybody else has it. But for some particular reason, this past Halloween season, I seem to have been susceptible to the Halloween deck fever. And I bought a few decks that seem to lend themselves particularly well to the season. Two of the decks are decidedly Halloweenish. One being this Halloween Tarot in a tin by U.S. Games Systems Inc. It decidedly has a Rider-Waite-Smith feel to it. So if you read that particular style of card, you'll find this right at home, you know, for sure. I know I've heard that people, you know, use this deck all year long because it's fun, and you can use whatever you want, of course. Another recent Halloween deck I bought was this Trigger Tarot. Despite the controversy surrounding this particular artist, which was a major disappointment for me to learn, it is a nice deck. I do have two or three other decks by this artist, and it does seem to be a favorite deck for this time of year. Another deck that I bought recently, but not for Halloween, although it does seem to lend itself very well to Halloween or this time of year, is this Tarot del Fuego. It's got a decided, it's a deck with flavor, you know. It's got an edgy feel to it, created by a Spaniard. I guess perhaps I respond to that, being a Spaniard myself. And he's a Spaniard from Spain, just as my family is. So I like this deck more than I thought I would. As soon as I held it in my hands, it kind of felt like I was home. And I think it is a good deck to use this time of year. And my newest acquisition, which I don't think it was created specifically for Halloween, but it does lend itself very well, is Santa Muerte Tarot. And it was created by an Italian, although the flavor of the deck is decidedly, I think, Mexican. Oh, the backs are lovely, aren't they? I think this deck, it's just a coincidence that somebody contacted me to do a reading, to touch base with someone who's passed on, and they asked specifically for this deck. So I know it was meant to be because this deck just came in the mail yesterday. I just happened to have it. And I think this deck would lend itself very well to that type of communication, especially this time of year when the veil is thin, as we've already established. Other decks that I've had and have used for this time of year have been, let's see, well, the oldest one that I gravitate towards during this time of year has always been this one. This one was created in the 70s specifically for the movie Live and Let Die, a James Bond film. Now, I don't have the original promotional deck, which I wish I did have, but I got this one shortly thereafter, maybe in 75, 76, maybe. And yeah, these cards have a little bit of a sinister feel to them, Not that they're evil, but they just have that feel, If I could find maybe the Sun card, you'll see what I'm talking about. Oh, look at this. Check out the Death card. I mean, you never expect the Death card to have a overly cheery feel to it, but it does seem to be a deck that lends itself very well to this time of year. Anyway, it's a favorite. I like using it all year long. Anyway, another deck that I've had for a long time and I traditionally use during this period of this time of the year is the Bosch Tarot, based on the artwork of Hieronymus Bosch, a Flemish or Belgian artist from either the either the 1400s or early 1500s. And if you're familiar with his artwork, it lends itself very well to this season. In more recent years, because I do prefer a Pip-style deck over a Rider-Waite's traditional deck, I've been using, this one, the Tarot, Le Tarot Noir, is a favorite of mine. It definitely has a gothic feel to it. Created by Justine Tournelle and Matthieu Hackiere. I'll show you from the books so that we get the bigger pictures. You can tell by the artistry that it's got a gothic feel to it. And as I mentioned, it's a Pip-style card. So if you do like using Pip cards, this is a beautiful, beautiful deck. And it does have an edge to it, Another deck that I really enjoyed using during the season of the year was a Deviant Moon Tarot deck created by Valenza. Now, I believe this is the second edition because it's a borderless edition. The first edition, I believe, had a border on it. And it does subscribe to the Rider-Waite tradition. But for a while, I enjoyed using it, despite its association with Rider-Waite. I don't hate Rider-Waite tradition. It's just that I prefer Pip-style decks. But then Valenza, the same artist, came up with another deck, which was a Pip-style deck, the Trionfi della Luna, which I have in two flavors. It might come in more. The Paradoxical, which kind of is like a reverse imagery, almost like a color negative look. And this one, which is a little bit, I guess, a little bit more standard. I like using this deck all year long, but I particularly like it during this time of year. And it's a Pip-style deck with an edge. And the Paradoxical, the imagery is the same, but with a different colorization. And they're both really beautiful. Now, sometimes people have asked me to do a reading to communicate with someone who's passed on. And for a while, I was using these cards as that method because it is decidedly a ghost deck. But really, any of these decks really work very well in order to receive messages from beyond. And this is also a Rider-Waite-Smith orientation. Sometimes, a person who passed on was a reader, and so communicating with them or receiving messages from them through a deck of tarot is very appropriate because it was their medium. But other times, the person who passed on had no association with tarot, and their loved one just wants to communicate. And I'll always offer them an opportunity to pick from my decks. As I mentioned, somebody specifically came to me asking me to do a reading using this deck, which I just got yesterday, which was a major coincidence. And then in other times, most of the time, people will just say, you pick. Other decks that are really good to use this time of year would be, given the pagan nature of the season, would be the Druid Tarot, which does seem to adhere pretty closely to Rider-Waite-Smith, but with a pagan theme. A Druid theme. And then, of course, there's the Wildwood Tarot, which seems to have its own system. And you'll notice that I keep my cards in their original packaging. That wasn't always the case in the old days. When I purchased my decks, I'd keep them in a pouch. But that's changed over the years because as a collector, I got smart. But here we have the Wildwood Tarot, which honors a more pagan tradition. Which is also, obviously kind of the reason for the season, right? For this particular season. So there we have it. I think I've addressed every one of these decks that are on my table. These are the ones that are most requested during this time of year and the ones that I tend to gravitate towards as far as this, season when the veil is rather thin. Some of them can be used all year long. Some of them are kind of locked into this particular season. Some are used for fun, and some are used for, most of mine are used for serious business. But if we're at a Halloween party, one of these decks might be a fun deck to use. But if you're doing, other, work, with messages from loved ones who have passed on, any of the others would also be very good, choices to use. And my favorite for using for that purpose, well, I haven't had, these particular ones for very long. So it remains to be seen which ones I end up using preferably, But as of now, I really seem to like to use this. This was done by Fergus Hall, the James Bond one. I also like using this one by Patrick Valenza, and then my absolute favorite would be the Tarot Noir. At any rate, I hope you enjoyed this brief film of tarot decks, which are appropriate to this season of year. And until next time, peace.